Back to the sun.
Back,
Welcome.
yes, as you put it last time, the
Mhm.
journey of the sun through the houses. And we have arrived to the seventh house.
Yay! Contracts, marriage, relationships.
Yes, and we're halfway there.
Oh, contracts. So this should be easy, like business deals and stuff too, right?
Partnerships in general and the formality of partnerships usually requires a kind of a contract, like a marriage contract, business contract. But we'll go through the significations and we'll see how the sun does here. Sounds good too?
Sounds great. Look
All
at
right.
this is the never-ending sun, like Saturn.
I know, but based on this episode now, we are toe to
Uh,
toe with Saturn because Saturn was 4 episodes. This is four, and we're only up to seventh house.
okay. But you were saying like the most significant houses are the first few houses, right?
Not significant, but because they can swing either
Hmm.
or they just have such a strong presence that
Yeah.
it's worth talking about it. And I just wanted to give the sun its light of day because I said in other videos it's been bastardized and just reduced to the father.
Yeah,
But the
yeah.
sun is so significant. So it's worth spending a little bit of time just putting a little bit of life back into it to see how much it's actually related to our lives, to our narratives, and how much of a symbolism comes into play, and not just the father. All right. Should I start with the significations of the sun again? Because this is probably going to be a separate video on its own.
Yeah.
All right. So the primary signification of the sun is the soul, consciousness, self, ego, identity, center of being. Another category goes to reliability, stability, confidence. We get notions like self-trust, being self-possessed, self-governed. All of these kind of meanings come out of the sun. The sun also represents light. So it illuminates, is about clarity, vision, fame, because the spotlight goes on us. It also represents authority figures, leadership, leaders, government, governance, and also the father. And lastly, career, because the sun is representing our sense of purpose, and our career is usually what we feel our purpose is, and then we just make it our life's work and we keep chipping away at it. So the sun comes to represent career also. So yeah, those are the general main significations of the sun. And then just to briefly give the significations of the seventh house, even if I didn't want to be brief, is quite brief. So the seventh house, we can put it into two categories. One, it has to do with other people because it's in the sector of the chart that pertains to others. So it's like houses 6, 7, and 8 is the others. Opposing that, houses 12, 1, and 2 are about the self. So we're on the bottom part of the charts, which is about others. So two categories here, other people, and the other theme in the seventh house is about disappearance of things. So when we're talking about the others, we're talking about partnership of any kind. So business partnership, marriage partnership, and in general, it has to do with marriage. This is also a house of cooperation. We have to cooperate with others. This house also has to do with commerce and trade and exchange in general. And when we go to the disappearance part, disappearance is literally things disappearing, coming to an end, coming to its conclusion. Ultimately, it's denoting the end and death of things by the time we get to the end of the seventh house. And the reason for that is because in the first house, we're talking about the eastern horizon. So wherever you look, find the eastern horizon, that's where the sun is going to rise. That's the first house. So the sun is strong, powerful, and ascending. In the seventh house, the sun is descending and disappearing. So the light is coming to an end. That energy, vitality that comes in the morning when you wake up, you're full of life. It's coming to an end when the sun sets and the sky starts to go dark. That's why it represents disappearance, conclusions, ending, and death. There's a death of sun in the seventh house because it's setting. So these are basically the kind of symbolism and themes that we're dealing with when it comes to the sun and the seventh house. But let's talk about how the sun does actually in the seventh house in astrology. In general, overall, The sun does not get a good reputation or description in the seventh house. As we'll see, when the sun is prominent, positive, strong, good dignity, maybe the sun's even exalted, but even an exalted sun in the seventh house, it's still going to have some glitchy slants. But if you do have a positive prominent sun, we'll talk about some ways that the sun can work itself out positively in the seventh house also. But in general, its symbolism brings about certain struggles. So just giving everyone the heads up. Okay, so let's just go through some of the positives first, yes?
Yeah.
Because we're going to get to like death and endings is going to get a little grim. So start with a little bit of lights. Okay.
Like the sunrise.
Yeah. So the sun represents authority. It has a strength. There's a sun, I was saying, like, for example, in the first house, and we'll see it in the 10th house, it comes to have this centrality. It becomes a central figure where everything else orbits around it. So it's just denoting a kind of a strength and a pull to it. So when you put the sun in the 7th house, it's dignified, it's strong, it's positive. You can get a partner here who has those qualities. And that is a good thing to have in a partner. You don't want someone who's very needy, always dependent, always looking to you. It's nice to have someone who can hold their own in a relationship, because sometimes you drop the ball in life and you want to have a partner, whether it's a business partner or a marriage partner, to be able to pick that ball up and to carry it the way till you rejuvenate and recuperate and then can take the ball again, right? So in that sense, the sun could be a positive figure in the 7th house. And I don't know, some people might give this a negative slant, but to each their own. For another person, it might be a good thing. Some people look for influential partners. They want a partner who has a lot of authority. So the sun in the 7th house can indicate that. So if that is something that someone wants, if that's their thing, sun in the 7th house can signify that.
Well, so like a lot of people want a powerful spouse.
Yeah, they want a famous spouse. They want a powerful
fame. That's
spouse.
right. Yeah.
Because the sun represents fame, right? They want, I don't know, maybe someone has a fetish for like, I want to be with a politician, you know, as my spouse. They have to be this, the head figure of some sort in some domain of life, the status thing that people look for.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to pass a judgment and say that's a wrong way of looking at it. If someone wants that, and this is a signature that they have in their chart, they probably have that desire because the sun is there anyway. And then it's indicating if the rest of the chart supports it, that's how your spouse is going to be. And then if you have a business partner who's decisive, who's confident, they have a sense of authority, they can make those kinds of business decisions. That's a good thing in the 7th house. So again, a dignified, positive, prominent sun can bring that about in the 7th house. That's another positive slant we can give to the sun. So again, people pass judgment on these kinds of statements, but people have different desires. And if someone gets their desires met, then that's a good thing for them. But from the outside, and as the perceiver of someone else's life with our own ideas, we might cast our judgment on them. The sun in the 7th house can also indicate, and I'm going to give this to a prominent positive sun because I'm saying the individual wants this and they get it. They want someone for them, thumbs up to people who want this. They want someone who will bring some influential thing about them and themselves, because the 7th house can represent you or your partner. So they want a partner who will help them shine. So this could be like a wealthy partner. This could be a good looking partner. This could be a partner who will help you in your business to make you an influential person. So it's basically taking someone else's vitality, because the sun also represents vitality, and injecting that energy into your own life, and someone's willing to do it. So there's that sense of cooperation that comes out of it. I'm saying this is a prominent positive sun because there's a willingness of the other one to do it. That egotistical factor is not coming in. So the person gets this desire of what they have met. And I want us to remember, this is a karma house. And I was talking about the 4 goals of life very explicitly in the 6th house video. And karma has to do with enjoyment. There's a goal of life that, okay, you know your sense of purpose, which is your dharma. You know you have built the wealth, which is artha. You better know the art of enjoyment, otherwise you wasted life in some sense. So the 7th house has to do with this. Now, if the person helping this individual and enjoys this kind of cooperation, and the person wants this kind of cooperation, and then they enjoy it, this is a kind of a karma happening in the 7th house. So the person can get the spotlight on them because of the person that they're with. So we could interpret the sun in this way in the 7th house too. Does that make sense?
Like Cristiano Ronaldo's girlfriend, like all these famous athletes and
Yes,
famous
these are,
people.
I don't know what their charts are like, but these are good examples. Because of your spouse, you're getting the spotlight on you, and somehow it's becoming part of your success. And hopefully the person wants it, because now we're talking about a son that's dysfunctional. Because let's say they're very private and they don't like this, and they end up with an influential person and the spotlight's on them and they don't like it, then we're not talking about a son that's positive, prominent. But if they like it, we're talking about the signification of a sun that's positive in the chart in the 7th house.
I would think that would cause problems eventually in the marriage. Because you know, when sometimes it gets to your head.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, like people change, right? With fame and.
Some people, yeah. Yeah. Some people handle it well, but other people, it's a hard one to negotiate with when you're visible and all lights on you. Yeah, for sure. Oh yeah, and then you can get in the business partnership context too, related to this. So let's say you're a famous person. I'm just your friend. I'm your buddy. And we start a business together. We start a burger joint, or I don't know, a hot dog stand, whatever. By the virtue of the fact that you're famous, our business will succeed.
Oh, okay.
We
Not
have
bad.
a marketing set, that trade and commerce aspect of it. So you can get these kinds of dynamic in a business partnership as well. Yeah, in general, the sun in the 7th house, we can start giving its charisma and authority and leadership, these kinds of qualities, the confidence, the assertiveness that the sun has. It just works itself well in the 7th house when the sun is functional. But that's pretty much as far as we can take it. And now we have to go to the dissonance that's in the 7th house when the sun comes there. Shall we enter that domain where the sun is now setting?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So one of the primary things to remember about the 7th house, in order for the 7th house to be functional, especially when it comes to partnership, business partnership, trade, commerce, they're talking about cooperational dynamics between people. If people cannot cooperate in the 7th house, the 7th house becomes a kind of a hell. It becomes super dysfunctional. Like a marriage, when we think about it, the couple have to be cooperative, negotiating, compromising, choosing the greater good all the time. And there's another thing to consider too. When 2 people get married, one of the reasons why marriage falls apart now is because the couple come together. They're like, oh, we love each other, 5th house. Let's go get married, 7th house. They get married. 2 years passes by. The guy looks at the woman, or the woman looks at the man and says, you're not meeting my needs. But that's not what the marriage was ever about. The marriage, the minute that contract is signed, the contract itself is an entity where the couple are now serving that entity, which requires them to constantly cooperate, compromise. And the moment that that marriage becomes about one person's needs, you're not doing for me, I'm not getting my needs met, I don't feel the way I need to feel, that marriage is in deep, deep trouble, because the person has forgotten that they're actually serving this third entity in the marriage, which is the marriage itself. That's what will keep them together. And when the sun comes here, the sun has to do about the self. The sun has to do with the ego. The ego by itself is not necessarily a bad thing. But the ego is the way we negotiate ourselves to get what we want from the world so that the world sees us and treats us the way that we want. Now, if the person has so many aspects of themselves as self-oriented and about themselves, then we have an egotistical and an egocentric person. And in the seventh house of cooperation, that is hell in the making. That's going to make the business partnership fall apart. That's going to make a marriage fall apart. Exchange and trade of any kind becomes imbalanced and things start to fall apart. So ego conflict in relationships becomes a very common theme with the sun in the seventh house. This is the person themselves who has the chart, could be the egotistical party, or their partner is acting in that manner. So instead of the two people looking at each other and trying to figure out what each other's needs are, one partner is always dictating to the other partner what their needs are and how their needs need to be met. So in this kind of dynamic, one person always feels neglected. One person, the power balance and the power dynamic in the relationship becomes skewed. And this is very burdensome in a marriage dynamic and or a business relationship, that cooperation is getting destroyed in the middle. Yeah, so here the person's always prioritizing their own needs and what they want.
Is it also because of that arrogance? Like, I'm famous, I'm this, it should be about me?
Yeah, that could very much, but even they might not even be famous, but it's just,
Or successful or whatever.
or just have a sense of self-importance. Like, my needs
Okay.
are important. It's like, well, the other person has needs too. You have to meet them in the middle and compromise. And you do hear people say this sometimes. It's like my career and my life, and he doesn't do this or she doesn't do this. It's like you didn't marry a slave to just support you in your endeavors. You have agreed to a contract of building life together cooperatively, right? So yeah, it's just the relationship becomes very skewed because the sun has that center of self, center of being about myself. It has a strong sense of self. But that strong sense of self is actually when the sun is healthy, you're supposed to protect other people. You're supposed to be life-giving, life-generative, not life-destroying. When the sun is dysfunctional, it actually starts to take on that kind of a meaning. It destroys other people for its own needs, just to have a sense of itself and a sense of identity, you know? And on the flip side of this, talking about identity, there could be other dynamics that are very burdensome too. Some people need to be in a relationship to even have a sense of self. Like if they, like a relationship ends and they're by themselves for 2 months, they are drowning. Like, I don't know who I am. Life doesn't have a meaning. So when they are with a partner, they're operating from a premise of fear all the time. There's too much neediness and there's too much dependence on the other person to have a sense of self. Like, I don't know what my purpose in life is without a partner. So they need their sense of self and identity from a relationship. And usually people who have this, they project their needs and their insecurities onto another people. They can actually become controlling, manipulative, needy, and these are very hard dynamics and personalities to deal with in life. So these kinds of things strain marriage, partnership, and even in a business partnership, you want someone competent. You want someone confident. You don't want someone who every day comes to you and is constantly relying on you and your energy source and your vitality to make all the decisions, to show up everywhere, to do everything. You want that equal, reciprocal, cooperative relationship. So not having a strong sense of self too, and being over reliant on your partner for that identity and that sense of self also creates a lot of burdensome feelings. So that's another thing, like that dependency that it creates on a partner is another theme that comes up in the seventh house.
I know a lot of people like that.
Yeah, a lot of people.
I mean, I don't know what their chart is, but just the way you've described it, like they're dependent or they have to be in a relationship or like unless they're so-and-so's wife, for example,
What do you mean,
they don't have it.
so-and-so's wife?
Like I'm
So-and-so.
saying, No, I'm saying like there's people I know, like they identify themselves as I'm so and so's wife.
Oh, right. Yes.
Like they don't, otherwise, like if they were to get divorced, and she did get divorced, actually, sadly, and she had a very, I mean, divorce is horrible in general, but I think it was just more that her whole like identity is now gone.
Yes. And you know, historically, and I would say unfortunately in a lot of ways, especially unfortunately for people who would end up with spouses that would neglect them and would leave them, is that historically women were conditioned to take on an identity or even have an identity or a self-concept only when they were in a relationship, like a marriage to a man. Like in my own country, the culture of my homeland, a woman, so if I'm, for example, my grandfather's a doctor, right? My grandmother was not a doctor, but by the virtue of being married to a doctor, she was called a doctor. Like, because in Iran, they call someone doctor, whatever their last name is, right? So they would call her doctor and her last name. We don't take our husband's last name there, but by the virtue of him being that, that had become her identity. Thank goodness that the relationship lasted and they're both almost 100 years old now. But imagine your identity gets so tied up socially and culturally too, because that is the expectation. And then the man neglects, the man cheats, the man leaves. And the woman historically had to have or find a sense of self without this person. It was very difficult. But now there's a residue of that still left, and in some cultures is still quite strong. But we can also see this in both male and females in our times. Like there are people who are very dependent on relationship for a sense of self. And so long as they have a relationship and the relationship gives them the sense of self they want, because it's not any sense of self nowadays either. It's not just to be married. You want your partner to make you feel a certain way. And then when that doesn't happen, the friction starts and there's a lot of bitterness that starts to come forward too, which makes a relationship ultimately impossible. It brings it to an end, that other theme that's in the seventh house, endings. Especially a sun that's weak or dysfunctional or not dignified in the seventh house, one of the things that it's going to do, it's constantly denoting death and endings of things. This is not like literal death of the person, but some people do feel like they're dying when their relationship ends. Literally something inside of them just dims and it's like it's dying. And the sun can bring this feeling. This can become a very prominent feeling in the seventh house when the sun's there and it's struggling.
Yeah, so you could be living in a very miserable marriage.
Yeah.
Like, does it bring divorce?
Well, the ending is a divorce, right?
Oh, okay. So it is. Okay, I wasn't sure if it was that or you're just basically living like two individuals in the same house.
That could happen too, right? Yeah, and this theme of death and endings, so it can occur through partnership that's related to businesses, marriage partnership, contracts, cooperation with someone comes to an end, you know.
But that's why I was asking you, sorry to cut you off. Like, that's why, is it actually divorce or is it just like, you know what, we hate each other, but we're staying together because of the kids?
Yeah, you're not hitting that end point of the seventh house then, which it has to do about, yeah, their love has died. Their
Yes.
cooperation has died. All of those things have died, but it's like the corpse won't rot away. So they'll just like, but somehow the marriage contract is not dying. And you know what? You might have a Saturn there when that happens.
Oh, okay.
Saturn in the seventh house, and let's not get Saturn and Libra mixed up. Saturn in the seventh house by itself could create that binding, concretize it. It's like cemented. The person's like, I really want out. Saturn's like, nope, you're in it for the long haul. So yeah, they might even hold on for the sake of the children, for the sake of money and assets. Like they don't want to pay taxes, they don't want to pay lawyers. People have a ton of different reasons why they don't want to end it. So in some way, that ultimate ending in the seventh house doesn't come to fruition, even though the people want it. But the sun is stable, but the sun has a cyclical nature to it that things comes to an end. It's not like Saturn that stubbornly holds to. So I would say it's more significations of the Saturn archetype and Saturn symbolism when they just stay for another 50 years, even though there's no cooperation, no love, no significations of the seventh house are at play, but they're just there and they refuse to end it. You know?
Okay, so the sun could lead, like basically because the
Yeah,
sun
the
is sitting
sun
there,
will
it's
set.
the end. Yeah.
The sun will set. The sun is saying that it will
End of
come
the
to an
relationship.
end. Yeah, end of a business partnership, end of this contract, end of this cooperation. You know, like the North American, Canada, US, and Mexico, for example, they have a partnership and a cooperation. We're talking about a seven house theme here. You know,
Oh, yeah.
it's a seventh house. And because I have a contract, this is how we do trade, commerce, and our exchange. And we're partners, we're in a partnership.
Free trade agreement of some sort. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's talking about a seven house theme. When you put the sun, even with countries and these kinds of things, it's like something's gonna happen or is indicating, especially when the sun is weak or prominent and weak, because the sun could be prominent and dysfunctional. So it's really gonna take it there. But you can just have a sun that's not strong, but it's not a prominent sun. It's just kind of like in the background. But when the sun is prominent and it's negative, it will take it to that ending eventually. So those treaties will come to an abrupt end suddenly. Those contracts will be annihilated. The marriage will end. So it's indicating these kinds of conclusions and then the disappearance of the previous state of being. I don't mean like nation state, because we were just talking about that. Like that state of cooperation comes to an end. So yeah, the disappearance of the seventh house when the sun comes here with such a condition can indicate these kinds of things. And then another thing happens too with these endings, especially on a personal level, let's say in a marriage dynamic, even if you have a strong sense of self, because the sun is here, these kinds of endings indicate shift in people's identities too. So if you see someone who has a sun in the seventh house and they go through marriage, and if you pay attention, there's a ending to the old identity. These are the people who will transform themselves after a few years. They will do things very different. They might become self-oriented, or they just change in terms of how they cooperate with people. Their sense of self changes relative to this relational dynamic of the life. So the sun can also indicate such things. And then for a second, I wanted to talk about, originally, I wasn't sure if I was going to talk about this aspect of the seventh house, that again is a karma house, that it's about enjoyments. Again, to give the sun a positive stance when it's prominent positive, there are certain human beings, because of their confidence, because of their strong sense of self, because of a healthy sense of identity that's within them, a healthy sense of ego, they actually bring a lot of strength and stability into a relationship. And whoever that's privileged enough to be with such a human being in a business partnership or in a marriage kind of a dynamic, they bring a kind of a joy. There's something beautiful about being with people who are stable and confident, reliable. And this is exactly what you want in a partnership, business or marriage. In the seventh house, when the sun's here and the sun's in good condition, it can indicate these things. So the sun has the capacity to bring enjoyment in this way too. And then if someone has a good sense of self and they are with a partner who also has a good sense of self, so we have two functional suns, they can bring a lot of joy to each other's lives too. So when the sun starts to work positively in the seventh house, there is a lot of karma in the seventh house too. I mean, it's not, sun doesn't bring play. And like when we think enjoyments, we generally think about indulgence and sensual pleasures. Yeah, just a sense of play, but the sun doesn't bring that. But having a stable human being is very enjoyable in the long haul of life. You want someone who will show up. You want someone who's dependable. You want someone who you can rely on, and someone who can do that with you. That kind of a dynamic actually makes life very sweet. because there's nothing worse than being with someone where you feel like your dynamic is in a constant state of frailty. They're always going to leave. When are they going to leave? Are they going to stay in this relationship? Do they care enough? Will they pay the rent? Will they do this? Well, that kind of instability is just so much anxiety. There is no joy. But when you know someone can take care of life because of their own personhood, because they have that strength, it brings that karma into life. There is something to be enjoyed.
But isn't that
Otherwise,
also like a marriage of convenience?
yeah, but I didn't give marriage of convenience a good slant. I said that someone may want, I made that very clear at the beginning, because then we're talking about a dysfunctional son. So someone wants someone who has fame, for example, so that
Mhm.
they have the spotlight on them, but the partner is also a willing participant and they want that. So now
Yeah.
it works out in their chart. But if the partner's like, what are you doing that for? You know, this is my work. That, and then the other person's like, well, I want it and I married you. That's dysfunctional. But if they're both thinking about it as like a marriage of convenience, I guess I don't know
Like,
how that usually works from the perspective of one person. It doesn't involve both people. So it's talking about some dysfunctionality in the seventh house. It's like using someone, no?
yeah, but sometimes, like even back in the day, traditionally, you're marrying two families
Mhm.
for almost like a contract between the families to ensure that wealth or that status or whatever it is, royal blood, lineage,
Mhm.
whatever, stays intact.
Yeah.
So it's almost like I'm married to X and so is married to Y because and we're making this work because we both are benefiting from it.
Yeah, but that's cooperation.
Okay.
Still,
Yeah.
there's still the dynamic of that understanding. We're signing this contract for
Mhm.
the sake of keeping the peace between these two countries because the prince and the princess are now married, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So everyone's cooperating, but as soon as there's one person skewing that cooperative dynamic in the seventh house for their own benefit, for their own sense of self, for their own gains, we're getting a dysfunctional house, and it will start moving towards that theme of the end of the seventh house, which is endings and death and conclusions of things.
Yeah, because obviously that's complete opposite of being a comma house, right?
Yeah, the karma aspect comes from that cooperative reciprocal dynamic that's in the seventh house. And again, going back to that whole thing of the sun can create burdensome feelings because of these imbalanced and skewed ways of being in the seventh house. So it can become a joy kill, that karma that's supposed to come out of the seventh house.
Well, yeah, because I guess it's kind of like what we said, like it's defeating like having the sun there is defeating the purpose of being a comma house. Like
Yeah.
it's negating it. The
Yeah, and
sun is negating that joy, that happiness, that like
yeah,
enjoyment of the
yeah.
whole business partnership or relationship.
Yeah. And just especially when the sun makes itself the center in the seventh house, because the seventh house, I was saying in the first house, the sun in the solar system's in the middle, everything around it is orbiting it. That's what the sun likes. That's what the sun's comfortable with. When the sun comes to the seventh house, it's like, you know what? You're not the center anymore. You're just another planet and you're orbiting this contract. You're orbiting this marriage. You're orbiting this business. You're a nobody. And the sun, if it doesn't have a good sense of self or identity, this is just shattering to it. Like, what do you mean? I'm the center. You orbit me. You orbit my needs and what I need. So this is one of the reasons why the sun has such a difficult time in the seventh house. It is the periphery now. It is not the center. And it has to learn how to orbit other things in a very equal manner as every other regular everyday Joe. And it's the king. And it doesn't want to do that. And usually people who don't want to do that, when you actually have a good deep look at them, they have a sense of the confidence in them is low. Why do you need to assert yourself all the time? Why do you need to be the center of attention all the time? Why does everyone have to cater to you all the time? Why do you have to shine all the time? So the problem's actually stemming from the person, that person's own low self-worth. low self-confidence, that they're trying to enforce this rule in an environment that doesn't apply. And it just makes everything fall apart. Yeah, this is just like one of the worst things to be in a partnership where the partner is authoritative, overwhelming, overriding. These kinds of dynamics can happen in the seventh house.
But this is just based on the raw interpretation. Like it's obviously everybody's chart is different. And
Yes, yes. I will say this. So when you scale a chart, even if you have a exalted sun here, and in every subchart, the sun is doing good to excellent, by the virtue of the fact that the sun is showing up in the seventh house, it's going to get scaled down. We don't scale the sun up in the seventh house. So I don't know. Go away. So for that reason, the sun in general in the seventh house gets a difficult slant. It's not a happy place for the sun. The sun wants to shine. It wants to be visible. The sun is setting here. It's going to die. This is not where the sun wants to be. I'm going back to that whole watching the sunset. If you have ever watched a sunrise, is one of the most powerful experiences a human being can have. If you can see the sun pass a horizon or come up from behind a mountain, it blows your mind. Like, first there is that twilight, and then that area starts to become where the sun's coming up, just becomes a little bit light. If there are birds around, they'll do a symphony for you in the morning, just chirping away. It's crazy. Right before the sun is about to come up, it starts to peak, and you just see like this rim of fire. And then this bowl of fire is just like second by second rising up and ascending. And then it gets to a point that while you're looking at it, you just feel like your eyes are burning. It is so powerful. That's what the sun wants to be. That's the essence of the sun. In the seventh house, it's hard to give the sun a good slant because it's the antithesis of its essence. That's why it gets scaled down, even when it's exalted, even when it's in good condition. These are the things we have to take into consideration. But yeah, it matters. Like, where is the ruler of the seventh house? What's being aspected? What's happening in the first house? Because it's a house right opposing the seventh house.
oh yeah, so we even talked about that with our last video with the six. Like it's like, yeah, it's like a chain. You keep following the trail
Yes.
to get more and more information. So it doesn't always just mean you're gonna divorce or whatever. You got to look at a lot of different things.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, no, it doesn't always means divorce. But when you get certain planets in certain houses, you might even get life struggle, but it's indicating the person will be triumphant, or they will learn something very significant, like a soul lesson throughout this life. It was not in vain, or at least it won't feel that way. At the end of it, when it's all said and done, the person's like, I get it, and I'm glad for it. But you get certain planets in certain places, it brings friction and it brings struggles, and the person might come out of it and they'll be like, the hell, like the world is cruel, like why did I have to meet this person? Why? It can give you these kinds of feelings where it's just unsettling and unpleasant. Even Saturn in the seventh house, sometimes you need the longevity in a marriage, because I've seen this so much now. People are going through certain struggles and it's lasted for like 2-3 years. Like, when is this going to end? They want the marriage and the relationship to end. They're like, I can't do this. This person's crazy. They're driving me crazy. Life feels awful. I don't want to be with them. And then something about the external world, go away. Something about the external world was creating certain pressures. For example, in this case, where they were both crumbling. But then by some good fortune or by their own effort, things change and they're actually even stronger and they continue. And Saturn there kept them together through that brutality of life. Saturn was probably bringing the brutality too, but it also kept them together. And then they look back and in hindsight, they're like, man, I'm glad we didn't break up or end this dynamic marriage relationship, and we made it through. you put other planets like the sun who don't have that staying power and that enduring quality of Saturn, within 2 years or less, they might bring the relationship to an end. It's indicating these kinds of things. And it's good to keep it in mind. It doesn't mean that these things will happen to a person. A lot of people have sun in the seventh house and they were married for a lifetime. But it's just good to understand the symbolism and how it's playing itself out. You know, someone might have a Saturn in their own chart in the seventh house, and it might be indicating not only that their partner who has a sun in the seventh house is bringing them hardships, but they also have that enduring quality within them to put up with that egotistical weirdo who has made the entirety of life about themselves. So again, what I was saying in the last video, the chart is very dynamic. And then when you're bringing two people, now you're talking about the synastry of their chart.
When you layer like two people's charts,
Yeah.
is it like, will you look at like, say, it's the person's seventh and you're looking at the partner's first? Like when you put it onto like,
No, that's
okay.
not how I look at a synastry chart. So let's say I have a Aquarius ascendant, and let's say there's nothing in Aquarius, but my partner, let's say, has Saturn in Aquarius. Their Saturn, because it's in Aquarius, is going to fall into my first house.
Okay.
Okay, even though their own Saturn might be in their seventh house, is going to fall into my first house. That's how we're going to be looking at it, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So whatever sign that's in the seventh house, the other partner, that sign is like, it's gonna fall in. Yeah, we'll do a separate video and I'll actually have slides prepared to go back and forth. So you can
Yeah, because I was
actually,
just wondering if the other person, like say they have a planet in the first, is it gazing on the partner's seventh and vice versa, right?
no, their planet in the first, like let's say is Mars and Leo, is gonna fall into their Leo sign.
Okay. Okay.
So that could be in the 10th house, it could be in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
third house. Do you know what I mean? That's what
Yeah.
synastry is about. But we'll do a whole episode looking at that. The point I was trying to make is that the seventh house is saying something about the relational dynamic of our lives with other people, because this is in the sector of the chart that has to do with others. So when we are in a relationship, we have to look at the partner's chart and see what it is they're bringing to our seventh house. What do we have there? What is the configuration of our chart? And sometimes there's something in our chart that allows us to cooperate and compromise with them, and vice versa, something in their chart. Even if the partner is not the best person, some people will make it through the entire life. But in general, the sun in the seventh house is indicating certain hardships.
What do you do? Like if you look at somebody's chart
Mm-hmm.
and they're going through a bad marriage, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, as I know, like in India, for example, they'll always give you remedial like prayers or certain
Yes.
things to do. In your opinion, as an astrologer, do you believe that there is free will like that, or things can be changed, like diverted? A lot of people look at astrology as, yes, it's their blueprint. Yes, these things can happen, but like religiously, if you pray or whatever, you can alter it. Or some people, if they're not looking religiously, they can be like, okay, now that I'm aware of that dynamic between my spouse, I can work on things differently. I can learn to be more, you know, cooperative or whatever. Like, do you kind of prescribe to that?
To your first part of your question, there is, I feel, there's an existential will that is beyond our will.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so much of the world's, I want to will myself to fly. Good luck. You're not going to fly. There's social will, and then there's individual will. So back in the day, the fact that people stayed society's will was much stronger than the individual will. They couldn't will their will. If they did, the repercussions were worse than staying in a marriage. So no matter what, of course, I'm going to resort to pray and anything prescribed to me. I'll even suffer. I don't even have the will to exert it. But times have changed. Individuals can now exert their will in this part of life, and They often do now because more than 50% of marriages come to an end, right?
Yeah.
They end in divorce. But if someone comes to me beyond the will question, do I stay or do I go now? The Clash song. I don't know if you know how to do the
Do
beatbox.
I stay or do I go? Do
You're like
I
encyclopedia
stay
of
or do I
tunes.
go?
Yeah. So if they come and they're asking that, it's actually funny you asked that because I was talking to someone last night, a friend, we were talking about this. They just got into a new relationship
Mhm.
and it's starting to bring its difficulties. And they felt like they
Oh,
need to,
already?
new as in like it's coming to a year, right?
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. And I'm comparing it to people who've been married like 60 years, you know,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
pretty
yeah.
new.
Okay.
So many things come up in 60 years that
Yeah,
year one problems just pale in comparison, right? Like
yeah.
people who had to bury their children, for example. It's like year one, no worries yet. But anyway, I was trying to say to this person, look, if you end this and you start a relationship with someone else, everyone will come with their challenges and no one comes. And if they do, and they're just at your service and they have nothing to say and they're just wanting to do whatever you say that you want, you're going to have other problems down the line with them too. Do you have it in your toolkit to actually negotiate with this person, accept certain things, work on certain things, build certain skill sets, or you go? I mean, it always comes down to this, unless if someone's super abusive, super toxic, that's a different story. But in terms of just having a hard time cooperating with each other, that's just I wouldn't tell someone to leave. The first prescription is let's
How can we
brainstorm
work on it?
different ways of how you can work on it. Because even if you leave this relationship and you end up in another one, you are going to face challenges because that is life and that's the nature of relationships are hard. People who think it's all game and plays is not because life is not. Life brings illness, life brings debt, life brings death, life brings depression at times, life brings so many different things that one person's experiencing it and the other person's experiencing it by proxy. Do you have the strength and the resiliency? All of our upbringing, all of us have been installed with different softwares and we don't know each other's software. So as soon as we get into a relationship, we got to get to work in a lot of ways because they're going to come and clash in so many different places. It's like, I don't feel loved that way. Well, I don't feel loved that way. You got to cooperate. You got to communicate. You got to figure it out. And then so much of the enjoyment, the karma of the seventh house is not just because we're having fun, but especially with having with serious planets like the sun and Saturn there, is because, yo, man, we met that obstacle and that challenge. Look at us. We overcame it. That is a kind of a joy to become stronger, to become wiser, to see bigger truth. The sun illuminates, it's about truth. Knowledge, we learn something. Our soul, the sun is a soul. We expanded the horizon of our soul. These kinds of things also bring us joy that at any point in life when we reflect back on it, we enjoy even those memories. But that dinner that we had that was fun, you might even forget it. That kind of a karma. So sun is a mature masculine principle. Sun has a seriousness to it. Saturn's just super serious. Even with a Mars here, Mars is very difficult in the seventh house. But let's say you can learn, you can put more tools in your toolbox and you hopefully have a partner who will cooperate because it's a two people dance. It's not like you can't slow dance with yourself. It just doesn't make sense, you know? Someone has
Yeah.
to dance with you. Hopefully your partner also has that maturity like the sun to be like, all right, we actually don't know each other. All right, let's figure it out. And they get to work and it's hard to do it because you're both going to piss each other off and both people will get hurt. So yeah, I wouldn't tell someone leave
You'll get divorced or whatever.
unless if it's an abusive relationship.
Mhm.
It's like, look, your safety matters. And still, even then, the decision's up to the person. But well-being and safety, it's a different issue. But 90% of conflicts that people have, 80% is just relationship problems. And if it's not with this person, it'll be another form in another relationship.
But I guess I was just asking if you saw that divorce is it basically like you look at it,
Yeah.
it could go either way. Look, like whoever you're speaking to,
Yeah.
you could get divorced. We see the indications that there could be a divorce, but like you said, you could also work together to kind of work through it, right?
Yeah, because the other parts of the chart is also showing how this person is suffering, what their hardship is, what it is about them that it's having a hard time negotiating. It's
because you're right. Because a lot of people, I'm not saying sometimes your partner is just a horrific human, but a lot of times when you actually look at relationships, sometimes it actually just has to do with yourself and your upbringing. And so you've gone into this relationship almost conditioning, like you're also part of the problem. And if you learn how to deal with your own emotions and your own self and your own thing first, you may be able to actually navigate that relationship and avoid a potential ending.
I believe this in my heart of hearts, unless if someone's a sociopath, a psychopath, a full-on narcissist, a full-on like a person who has something that from a place of our humanity we can't reach and touch. But in my heart of heart, I believe every human being is a lock and a key. So everyone is a riddle and everyone's like a lock, and there's a key to that lock. And the key is not just a person, a key is a method and a way of approaching that human being to meet them at a place where they can see you and they can see themselves. For example, when people start yelling at each other in a relationship, like where the hell did yelling ever get anyone? You're just talking over each other. I mean, the voice super loud, but no one actually hears each other. The methods that we employ in moments of frustration, friction, irritation actually worsens the situation rather than solve that riddle. It actually escalates things. So people think that they're not doing anything wrong. But were you also yelling? Like, was I contributing to anyone hearing anyone? Did that actually help? Other than you feeling like you were just bursting and getting your frustration out? All of us come with certain things, even when we think we're completely innocent, we're engaging in that dance, and a lot of times we're contributing something to that dynamic too. And even if the person wants to leave at the end of the day and be like, I want a divorce, it's still a very valuable lesson to have illuminated about what was your own limitation, how did you contribute, where did you fall short? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Still good to at least walk away with that than just like, I left because you did or didn't do that.
So in a way, like your clients, like if there's a couple and they're going through a rough patch and there's a potential for divorce, like from their chart, you can almost like, if they want to try and salvage it somehow, or they're both willing, like it's almost like you could do counseling. Like if you look at both of their charts and you see like, look, you could easily both get divorced. But you got 3 beautiful children, blah, blah, blah. Do you want to work this out? And it like, okay. So it's not like I'm sure there's some charts where there's like no change. It's 100% divorce. But like, I just think it's one of the scare, like divorce, illness, like these are all topics that are like, people are always, like you said, some people really want the divorce and they just want out.
Yeah.
But the other partner
it's good
obviously
news
doesn't.
to some people, yeah.
Yeah. But maybe the other partner doesn't. So there is maybe a potential by like looking at both of their charts together of how they could work through it, maybe.
And it's really when someone comes for a chart reading, it's what do they want to know? Do you know what I mean? But if someone comes for counseling, usually people come for because they want to work it out. No one comes to get counseling because like, I don't want to work things out and I don't want to understand things. You know, but when someone comes for a consultation, they're like, I've gone and seen a lawyer. Will I be successful in this divorce? It's actually not my place to advise them in that sense.
Oh, no?
what they're asking me to do. They actually have a specific question. So it's like, no, at this time, this won't be successful, or yes, it will be successful.
Oh, because they've already made up their mind and they've already
Yes,
done the
they made up
legals.
their
Okay.
mind. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
seeing a lawyer, the proceedings on the way. Like, who am I to now tell them, like, stop the proceeding now?
But
Because
if
you might
but
be
if
able to work it out.
yeah, because they've made that decision. But
Yeah.
if there's a partner who's like, look, my other partner wants out of this marriage.
Mhm.
I really want this to
Work
work.
it out. Yes. And
Okay,
I'll
so
be like,
then
let's figure it out. Let's look at everything. Let's figure it out. Let's see what you struggle with, why you feel the way you do. What is your objective? What is the outcome? What is this happiness, this karma that you want? I've noticed not just with relationship, a lot. We were actually talking about this in terms of countries.
mhm.
My country of origin, people had a revolution to get rid of their current regime at that time. A lot of people ended up with something that they didn't want because they didn't know what they actually wanted. They just know what they didn't want before. So there's a lot of times too in relational dynamic and in marriage is like, this person doesn't make me happy. Then you're like, let's explore what happiness is. And then when you actually do that, this person that they're with has all the qualities to do this thing, but they're putting the onus and the responsibility on the partner in some very strange ways, and no one could fulfill those things for happiness. The kind of happiness that they're talking about actually comes from within. And it's good to explore these things because, yeah, some things could be worked out with the partner, but some of our unhappiness in life has to do with ourselves too. We got to know where we begin and end. The first house is facing off the seventh house. We can't project the first house into the seventh house and expect to find the self in the seventh house. The sun also represents the self. So now you got that exponentially bigger, doubled. Like if you're putting that responsibility on the partner, you're setting yourself up and them for failure. There are certain things other people cannot do for you. They can help you, but they can't do it for you. So this is what the counseling allows people to start to differentiate some things and then understand how to speak to the other person, how to speak to themselves. A lot of times people's own minds are their own enemy. It's like they had a fight. The fight ended. The fight was like 10 minutes, but it's 10 days later, and the person has repeated that fight 250 times in their head. And that person is so much worse than they actually are in that moment. Yeah, and the sun is supposed to be assertive. Sometimes people are very passive aggressive in relationships. These are the kinds of things that the sun shows in the seventh house. So it's good to become aware of these things. And a lot of times, a lot of relationships or different phases of relationship is salvageable when these things are addressed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is I think what a lot of people, they don't take the time. And like you said, one person's happy to get out and already goes to a lawyer and now they've already made the decision.
Yeah.
But usually it's one party still wants in.
And relationships usually go through that phase, right? When the conflicts come up, cooperation gets very distorted and uncooperative. And then there's always that one party who wants to bounce, and then there's that other person who wants to stay. But as time goes by, because they just can't meet eye to eye at any point, and they're both like, yeah, okay, forget it. And what a sad thing when relationships ends, like that sadness that's in the seventh house that the day has concluded. Like you'll never have that day back. Like when I
Yeah.
think about that some days where it's nighttime and I look outside and I think back at the day, I reflect back. Sometimes I take photos of certain things throughout the day, and for some reason I'm going through the phone and I see the photo. I'm like, wow, that is the past. It's irretrievable. It's done. That's like the sun in the seventh house, right? It's the day is done, is over. We'll never be able to have it back. And a relationship, like someone who's been with someone for like 20 years, and then that relationship ends, and then the two people are existing in this world, and they have to pretend, or even if they don't pretend, even if it's real, the other person no longer exists. Like they have to go through the act of annihilating and ending that person in their life, all their whatever they have around the house. So that notion of endings in the seventh house, and when partnerships don't work, it has that sunset feeling with the person by themselves sitting at the beach.
Yeah.
So it's good to keep it if it's possible. But sometimes you're with crazy people, man. You gotta go. That
No,
happens.
I mean, obviously, like you said, if there's abuse and all these type of things, but I think sometimes, like you said, it's always usually one partner wants out, one partner wants in,
Yeah.
or sometimes there's infidelity or other things. And the other partner's just desperate to try to salvage that relationship somehow.
Yeah. And you know what? A lot of people experience infidelity and someone cheats on them, and somehow both couple are able to cooperate. We always make it look like one partner forgives the other partner, but they both had to work on it very hard. Yes, the one partner has to forgive. And part of that forgiveness might look like that the forgiving partner will rage, will have anger, will have insecurities and project it. So they're going to inflict pain back on that person a lot of times. And then that person has to forgive them. That's a form of cooperation. Do you know what I mean? And this could go on for like a year, two, maybe even more. So they both cooperated at the end. Yes, one person royally screwed up and they really hurt that person. And because they did that, we human beings, a lot of times when we're hurt, we project our hurt on other people and we hurt them. And then they also have to forgive us now. So that cooperative aspect is happening. And when people can do this, they're showing that masculine maturity, that maturity that's in Sun. It's bringing, yes, I destabilize our life by cheating on you, but now I'm acting as a center and I'm standing here and I will apologize a million times and now I will forgive you. And then things will get stabilized because that's what the Sun does. Sun wants to bring stability. And then some people cannot do this cooperation. Like the person cheated, now the person is left with this lack of stability. The reality was shattered. And now they're making a grievance, and this person's like, I thought you forgive me. What's wrong with you? It's game over.
Yeah.
So that cooperative aspect, that cooperation that's in the seventh house is everything. Everything in a business dynamic, in a relationship. Like the Sun is about visibility, and visibility is denoting something about truth. Part of cooperation in a business partnership or in a marriage partnership is being truthful. Can you be truthful with that Sun in the seventh house? That's a part of cooperation. Can you, Chris Rock says sometimes you have to play the tambourine. I don't know, have you ever heard that joke that he says?
No.
Sometimes in life, you're a rock star. You're like the center of attention. Like, look at me. Yeah. And then sometimes, and when you're in a relationship, you just stand in the background and play the tambourine because the other person has to take the spotlight.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's good advice.
Right? Now, you, the seventh house Sun, do you have the capacity, you as the king, as the illuminated one, do you have the capacity to step back sometimes and just play the tambourine in the background and let someone else shine? Because that's cooperation in relationship. Sometimes one partner is energetic, they're succeeding, they're shining, and the other person actually a little depressed and a little confused. They're not shining. That's not their time. Can you be happy for that person? That's a form of cooperation. Or do you start sabotaging them? Do you start nagging them right before they're about to go and do their presentation where they're supposed to get the biggest promotion of their life? Do you start a fight with them and make it about yourself? And then they go in there totally dismantled and can't do anything. These are the kinds of things that Sun brings in the seventh house that sabotages relationships. But again, like I say this with all the planets, if we're fortunate enough to live an entire lifespan, our jobs as human being is to learn and to become better. So yes, maybe we screwed up in a relationship or two, but hopefully we're learning. We're learning that our sense of self will not get demolished or hindered if sometimes we play the tambourine. We are not less than, and we don't lose our self-worth if we compromise with other people, if we actually give in to their will, because last time they give in to our will, it's okay if we do it for them. Hopefully we'll learn these things. But the sun in the 7th house is not gonna make it easy. And the instinct is that you should orbit around me. And people will put up with that for so long, and then eventually it's like, no. And then usually when people who say I should be the center of attention, they provoke their partner so much that that same partner will turn to them one day and be like, you're a nobody. You're a piece of shh. They get the worst insults. This is what happens. The worst possible things that could happen. But hopefully we'll learn. Yeah, so the sun in the 7th house, because this is where the sun sets, this is where the sun disappears, this is where the sun loses its directional strength. Because of all of these technical factors, sun symbolic interpretation comes to be more problematic than positive in the 7th house. Where are we at? Oh, you gotta go. Oh my God, I lost track. Why don't you say anything?
Because I think a lot of people find that important. Like, the whole divorce thing is a big, and just the fact that like things can work or you can't, like things can be kind of looked at, and like you said, look at the whole chart.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay.
No, cut me off next time. Whatever. We'll talk about it after.
Yeah, but when you're on the flow,
Fine.
and then to
That's
be
okay.
honest, it is like it's interesting to me anyway. And not that I'm married, but I was just
Interesting
saying.
to me too, man. It's like this is one of the hardest topics in life. Family and
Yeah.
relationships. So we're gonna wrap it up here. That was quite a bit for Sun in the 7th house, and in the last video, I have a feeling 8th to 12th will be a little bit faster than this. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you. Interesting conversation today.
All right, that's it for today. Much love. Till next time.